A very warm welcome. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Let me pose a question. Is the G20 Foreign Ministers meet a chance for India to become a more prominent force in the changing world order? Well, let me argue my case. India has the Herculean task of overcoming the great divide between the West and Russia-China as India hosts the G20 Foreign Ministers meet in New Delhi on March 1st and 2nd. Interestingly, this meet arrives days after the G20 Finance Ministers and central bank governors met in Bengaluru last week. But finance chiefs of some of the world's biggest economies failed to agree upon a joint communique at this meeting. Russia and China had opposed the West's condemnation of the war in Ukraine. And so, in an angry statement issued by Russia, its foreign ministry lashed out at the United States, the European Union, and the G7 countries as well for attempting to impose diktat that Russia called clear blackmail. And let me quote the Russian Foreign Ministry's statement. It says, "We regret that the activities of the G20 continue to be destabilized by the Western collectives and used in an anti-Russia way. While Moscow has accused the collective West of its confrontational approach towards the Ukraine conflict, France's Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire and his German counterpart Christian Lindner pressed India and the G20 grouping to include Bali communique of 2020 that recorded the condemnation of the war in Ukraine. And this was recorded in last year's Bali declaration. That explains why the meeting in Bengaluru had no joint communique. Instead, it was summed up in a chair's summary issued by India. Needless to say, the Bengaluru standoff is perhaps only a precursor to India's conundrum: how to walk the diplomatic tightrope. In a meeting where India is the president and has its own concerns, primarily with China vis-a-vis the LAC and security of the Indo-Pacific, a concern that's expected to be raised at the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting too. To be hosted on the sidelines of the G20 Foreign Ministers meet by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, this gathering will be attended by India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong, with the Japanese Foreign Minister Hayashi now skipping the overall event. But the Quad meet is unquestionably bound to raise eyebrows among the Russian and Chinese representatives. Moreover, China's newly appointed Foreign Minister Qin Gang is visiting India for the first time after New Delhi sent a stern warning to Beijing over the recent border skirmish in Tawang in December 2022 and complete disengagement in the eastern Ladakh sector in September last year. India has persistently maintained that normalcy between India and China cannot be restored without peace at the LAC, a message that is expected to be conveyed again to the Chinese foreign minister. How Beijing responds to New Delhi's messaging will be a defining moment for bilateral relations between the two. What's more is that Beijing's presence arrives at a time when the US-China tensions are reaching a new low every day. Even more so after the US shot down what it claimed was a Chinese spy balloon flying over its skies. The incident had prompted the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to cancel his trip to Beijing. Besides, US intelligence has already suggested that China is set to arm Russia in the Ukraine war. And as recently as Monday, the US Department of Energy assessed that the COVID-19 virus most likely came from a laboratory leak in China's Wuhan lab. Now, this claim has been sharply refuted by China. Furthermore, the war in Ukraine has just completed a year, with the UN General Assembly voting overwhelmingly on the eve of the war's first anniversary. The UNGA resolution called for an end to the war, demanding that Russia exits Ukrainian territory. 17 of the G20 countries, namely North America, Europe, Gulf countries, Turkey, and Brazil, voted in favor of this resolution. However, India, China, and South Africa abstained. And that's why it's safe to say that the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang land in Delhi on Wednesday at a time when the geopolitical climate is looking rather adverse. On top of that, Russia and China's role in the Ukraine war and the Indo-Pacific, even Taiwan, may come under strong criticism at India's premier multilateral conference, Raisina Dialogue 2. Hosted by the Ministry of External Affairs and the Observer Research Foundation, this dialogue takes place from March 2nd till 4th. Nonetheless, India's role has certain predicaments, though replete with opportunity. That India, along with Turkey and Israel, have the potential to mediate this war in Ukraine is a possibility that's been debated ever since the war began. But at present, if India can manage its balancing act between two arch rivals, and who are they? A united West versus Russia-China. Subsequently, achieving a joint communique at the G20 Foreign Ministers meet rather than settle for a chair summary as it did at the G20 FinMin meet. This feat is bound to reposition New Delhi as a prominent force in a changing new world order. Perhaps even enhance India's chances of securing a permanent seat at the UNSC's horseshoe table.